Sterling Vance broke up with me on a Tuesday, at a restaurant he'd chosen, over a risotto he'd ordered for both of us without asking, using the word ordinary no fewer than 4 times in a single monologue that he had, I would later realize, clearly rehearsed in the car. "I just think," he said, swirling his wine like a man auditioning for a role in a wine commercial, "that we've grown into very different people, Cleo. I need someone with more, I don't know how to say this kindly, spark. Someone unpredictable. You're wonderful, genuinely, but you're just so." He paused here, searching, clearly hunting for a word softer than the one he actually meant. Ordinary. I sat there with a forkful of risotto halfway to my mouth, processing the fact that my fiancé of 14 months, the man whose ring I was currently wearing, the man I had spent the better part of a year picking out linen swatches with, had just used the word ordinary to describe me the way you'd describe a beige couch you'd grown tired of. Ordinary, I repeated. In the best way, he added, which is a sentence that has never once, in the history of language, softened the blow of the sentence that came before it. Here is the part of the story I need you to understand fully, so that everything that follows lands the way it's supposed to. I was not, in that moment, actually devastated. Startled, yes. Mortified, in the specific way you're mortified when something humiliating happens in public and the waiter is hovering nearby pretending not to listen. But devastated? No. Because, and this is the detail Sterling Vance had absolutely no idea about, sitting there across from me in his tragically overpriced blazer, delivering his rehearsed speech about Spark, I had, 3 days earlier, sitting in a lawyer's office across town, already decided to leave him myself. Not because of money. Not yet, anyway. We'll get to the money, obviously, since it's right there in the title of this whole ordeal, hovering over everything like a wonderfully smug little cloud. I'd decided to leave him because somewhere in the last 8 months, I'd started noticing things. The way he corrected my grammar in front of his coworkers. The way he'd once described my job, I manage a small chain of independent bookstores, work I love with my whole chest, as a very sweet little hobby, really. The way he'd start sentences with "no offense," but, and then say something extremely offensive, as though the disclaimer functioned as some kind of legal immunity. So when Sterling Vance looked me dead in the eye, over a risotto he hadn't asked if I wanted, and called me ordinary in the best way, I did not cry. I did not beg. I did something that surprised even me. I smiled, took a bite of the risotto, which, for the record, was slightly undercooked, a detail I found deeply, cosmically satisfying, and said, "You know, Sterling, that's actually incredible timing." He blinked. "It is?" "Incredible," I confirmed, and left it exactly there, unexplained, watching a flicker of genuine confusion cross his face, because Sterling Vance, in 14 months of dating, had never once encountered a version of me that didn't immediately try to smooth things over, fix things, make everyone comfortable. This was new. This was, dare I say, unpredictable. Full of spark, even. If only he'd known just how much spark was coming. To understand the full, gorgeous irony of what happened next, I need to rewind 3 days, to a Saturday morning when I sat across from a lawyer named Reginald Abernathy, a man in his 70s with the unhurried calm of someone who has delivered life-altering news so many times it no longer registers as dramatic to him at all, and learned that my great-aunt Wilhelmina Castellano, whom everyone in the family called Aunt Billy, and whom I had visited exactly 6 times in my entire life, all before the age of 12, had died at 94 and left me, her entire estate, roughly $12 million. I want to be extremely clear about the state I was in for this meeting, because I think it matters. I showed up expecting nothing. My mother had warned me, gently, on the drive over, "Don't get your hopes up, sweetheart, Aunt Billy was eccentric. She might have left everything to a cat sanctuary, which, frankly, would not have surprised me, given that the one clear memory I had of Aunt Billy involved her keeping a fully grown peacock in her backyard for the ambience and naming it after a Roman emperor. So when Mr. Abernathy slid a folder across his desk, adjusted his glasses, and said, in the same measured tone he might use to discuss the weather, "Your great-aunt's estate, after taxes, and various small bequests to charitable organizations and, I should note, a peacock sanctuary in her name, comes to approximately $12.1 million, all of which she has left to you, Ms. Bramwell," I laughed out loud. In a lawyer's office. A genuine, disbelieving bark of a laugh, because my brain simply refused to process the numbers as real, the way you laugh at something too absurd to be frightening or thrilling yet, before the feelings catch up to the facts. "There's no mistake?" I asked, once I'd recovered myself, gripping the folder like it might evaporate. 12 million? Not 12,000? I need you to be very specific, because those numbers look similar on paper and I don't want to build a whole personality around a decimal point error. Mr. Abernathy, to his credit, did not laugh at me, though I caught the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth. $12,140,000, to be precise, before any investment decisions you choose to make going forward. Your great-aunt was, considerably more financially astute than her reputation suggested. She made a rather fortunate early investment in a technology company in the 1980s that most of the family assumed, and I quote her own words from our previous conversations, was a fun little side project she dabbled in with a friend who wore very unusual hats. I sat there, folder in hand, $12 million suddenly, impossibly real, and thought immediately, instinctively, unprompted, of Sterling Vance's face, how it would look, how it would rearrange itself, if he knew. Not because I wanted to flaunt it. Not because money changes who a person fundamentally is, deep down, in the parts that matter. But because I had spent 14 months slowly shrinking myself into a shape that fit neatly into Sterling's idea of who I should be, and here, suddenly, in a lawyer's office that smelled overwhelmingly of peppermint candy and old paper, was proof, hard and numerical and undeniable, that I had never needed his approval, his taste, his corrections, in the first place. I told no one but my best friend Dahlia that night. Not my mother, not Sterling, not a single soul beyond the two of us, sitting on my kitchen floor with a bottle of Prosecco we absolutely could not afford 3 days earlier and now, technically, could buy an entire vineyard of. "You have to leave him," Dahlia said, not even a full glass in, with the immediate, decisive clarity of a woman who had been quietly hoping for this exact permission structure for the better part of a year. "You were already planning to leave him, Cleo. This just confirms it. This is the universe handing you a receipt." "I know. When are you going to do it?" "Soon," I said. "I just need a couple days. I want to figure out how to say it without it turning into a whole thing about the money. I don't want him to think that's why I'm leaving." Dahlia raised her glass, Prosecco catching the kitchen light, and said, with the prophetic gravity of a woman who had absolutely no idea how right she was about to be, "Something tells me, Cleo, that this is going to work itself out in a way that's going to be extremely, deeply satisfying to witness." She had, as it turned out, tremendously undersold it. I told my mother about the inheritance 2 days after the lawyer's office, sitting at her kitchen table over the specific, sturdy tea she's made every Sunday of my entire life, and watched her go through a reaction so layered, so specifically her, that I nearly regretted not filming it for posterity. $12 million, she repeated, setting her mug down with the exaggerated care of a woman who did not trust her own hands not to shake. "From Aunt Billy. The peacock woman." The peacock woman, I confirmed. I always liked her, my mother said, in the tone of someone rapidly, retroactively revising an entire family history in real time. I want that on the record. I always said she was misunderstood. Eccentric, sure, but misunderstood. Mom, you called her that unhinged woman with the bird at Thanksgiving. Multiple Thanksgivings. It was a running joke. I contained multitudes about Aunt Billy, my mother said, with tremendous dignity, before abandoning the subject entirely and moving, with the speed of a woman recalibrating her entire understanding of her daughter's life, straight to the point that actually mattered to her. Does Sterling know? Not yet. Good, she said, and here, finally, my mother's face did something I hadn't expected. It hardened, just slightly, in the specific protective way mothers' faces do when they're recalling every small slight they've quietly filed away over the course of a relationship they never fully approved of. Cleo, I have to tell you something, and I need you to not be upset with me for not saying it sooner. Okay. I never liked how he talked to you. The corrections. The no offense, buts. The way he'd order for you at restaurants like you were a child who couldn't be trusted to choose her own dinner. I bit my tongue because you seemed happy, or at least you seemed like you were trying very hard to convince yourself you were happy, and I didn't want to be the meddling mother who ruins her daughter's engagement over a feeling. But I want you to know, now, $12 million or not, I never once thought you were ordinary. I thought you were the most interesting person I knew, and I thought he was too dim to notice, and I am, deep down, thrilled, genuinely thrilled, that the universe has apparently decided to make that abundantly, financially clear to everyone involved. I sat there, tea going cold in front of me, feeling something loosen in my chest that had nothing to do with money at all, and thought, not for the first time, that inheritances come in more forms than lawyers' offices tend to account for. Also, my mother added, brightening considerably, already moving into planning mode with the terrifying efficiency she brings to every family gathering, I assume this means you'll finally let me redo the kitchen. I've had my eye on a specific tile for 11 years, Cleo. 11 years I've been patient. Mom. I'm just saying. 12 million is a lot of money. Some of it could go toward tile. I'm not being greedy, I'm being practical. I laughed, the first truly unguarded laugh I'd had in days, and agreed, eventually, to the tile, which is how a small but not insignificant portion of Aunt Billy's fortune ended up funding what my mother now refers to, without a hint of irony, as the good kitchen, a title she uses in every single conversation about her house, forever, apparently, going forward. So there I was, 3 days later, sitting across from Sterling at that overpriced restaurant, having just been informed I was ordinary, in the best way, watching him work his way through a speech he had clearly practiced, possibly in front of a mirror, possibly with hand gestures, given the level of polish involved. I think, he continued, warming up now, apparently encouraged by my lack of visible devastation, that I need to be with someone who challenges me more. Someone with ambition. Someone going places. No offense, Cleo, but you've worked at that bookstore for 6 years. Same job, same routine, same everything. I need someone who's, you know. Growing. Growing, I repeated. Evolving, he clarified, as though this were a meaningfully different word. I actually met someone recently, nothing's happened, I want to be clear, nothing inappropriate, but she's a curator, at the Modern Art Museum downtown, and just talking to her, I felt this, I don't know, this spark I haven't felt in a long time. Her name's Simone. Simone Delacroix-Whitfield. She's incredible. She just got back from a residency in Marrakesh. I want you to sit, for a moment, in the specific comedy of this, a man breaking up with his fiancé of 14 months over risotto he ordered without asking, by describing in vivid, unprompted detail the woman he's already emotionally moved on to, whose double-barrel surname he pronounced with the reverence usually reserved for minor royalty. Marrakesh, I said. Wow. She's just so worldly, Cleo. So dynamic. I need someone dynamic. I understand completely, I said, and I did understand, genuinely, deeply, though not in the way Sterling assumed. I understood that I had spent 14 months with a man who needed, more than anything else in the world, an audience willing to be endlessly, performatively impressed by him, and that I had simply, finally, quietly run out of applause to give. He reached across the table and took my hand, an oddly tender gesture given the context, and said, with what he clearly believed was great emotional generosity, "I hope you know this isn't about you being a bad person. You're a genuinely lovely person, Cleo. You're just safe. Comfortable. And I think, deep down, I need someone who scares me a little. In a good way." "Sterling," I said, sliding my hand out from under his, calm in a way that seemed to unnerve him more than any amount of crying would have, "I think you're about to find out exactly how scary I can be." He laughed, a short, confused bark of a laugh, clearly assuming I meant something dramatic and small, a scene in the restaurant, maybe, a thrown wine glass, the kind of thing he could later describe to Simone Delacroix-Whitfield as evidence of how ordinary and predictable I truly was. He had no idea. Not the faintest one. I gave the ring back that night, in the parking lot, no scene, no tears, just a quiet, businesslike handoff that seemed to disappoint him slightly, as though he'd been hoping for more drama to justify the speech he'd prepared. "I'm sorry it has to end this way," he said, pocketing the ring with an ease that told me he'd probably already priced out how much he could get for it, or possibly had already decided to reuse it, a detail that would come back around, delightfully, months later. "Don't be sorry," I said. "Genuinely, Sterling. This might be the best thing you've ever done for me." He took this, predictably, as a wounded woman's brave face, patted my shoulder with the gentle, condescending kindness of a man consoling a golden retriever that hadn't made the cut for a dog show, and drove off in his ridiculous car, the one he'd leased specifically, I now realized, because it made him look like a man going places, off, presumably, toward whatever dinner or gallery opening or spontaneous Marrakesh-adjacent adventure awaited him with Simone Delacroix-Whitfield. I stood alone in that parking lot for a long moment, feeling the specific, buoyant lightness of a woman who has just been handed, entirely by accident, the exact permission she'd been quietly seeking for months, and called Dahlia before I'd even gotten into my car. "He broke up with me," I said, the second she picked up. "What? Are you okay? Do you need me to come over? Do you need me to key his car?" "I can be there in 10 minutes, I already have my shoes on, Dahlia. I'm fine. I'm better than fine. You will not believe the reason he gave me." "Tell me everything. Start from the risotto." I told her everything, start to finish, and by the end of it, Dahlia was laughing so hard on the other end of the line that I could hear her actual gasping for breath, the way you laugh at something that's simultaneously infuriating and gorgeously, cosmically funny. "He called you ordinary," she wheezed, "the same week you inherited $12 million. The same week. He has genuinely no idea. None whatsoever. Cleo." Dahlia's voice went serious, suddenly, with the gravity of a woman recognizing a historic moment as it unfolds in real time. "This is going to be the greatest story either of us ever tells for the rest of our lives. I need you to promise me you're going to let this play out properly. No rushing to tell him. No petty texts. We are going to let this unfold with dignity and grace and maximum comedic timing. I promise, I said, and meant it, not yet knowing exactly how spectacularly, how gloriously, that promise was about to be tested. Here is the thing about small cities, about shared friend groups, about the particular gossip ecosystem of people who've dated within the same overlapping social circle for years. News does not stay contained. It leaks. It seeps. It finds its way through side doors and group chats, and the specific, unstoppable mechanism of Sterling's own mother, Patrice Vance, a woman who has never once in her life kept a piece of information to herself for longer than the walk from the mailbox back to the house. It started small. A mutual friend mentioned, at a dinner party 3 weeks after the breakup, that I'd quietly bought out the lease on the bookstore I'd worked at for 6 years, becoming the sole owner overnight, a fact that traveled, as these things do, through at least 4 separate people before it reached Sterling in a slightly garbled form. Did you hear Cleo bought the whole building the bookstore's in? Sterling, according to Dahlia, who heard this second-hand from someone at that same dinner party, reportedly laughed it off. Must be alone, he apparently said. Cleo doesn't have that kind of money. She's just not that kind of person. Then came the car. I'd never cared much about cars, genuinely, but my old one had finally died a slow, wheezing death 2 months after the breakup, and rather than replace it with another modest, sensible sedan, I did something I'd never once in my life allowed myself to do. I bought exactly the car I wanted, purely because I wanted it, no calculation, no compromise, no imagining what Sterling would think of it. Word of the car reached him within a week. This time, according to multiple sources, Dahlia has an extensive network. I want that on the record. Sterling's confidence cracked, just slightly, just enough for him to start asking pointed, casual-sounding questions at gatherings he knew I might be disgusted at. Is Cleo doing okay? Did something happen with her family? Did she get, like, a big promotion or something? The truth, delicious and slow-burning, took nearly 2 full months to fully reach him, and when it finally did, at, of all places, his own mother's birthday dinner, where apparently my name came up in a conversation about the bookstore, and Patrice Vance, unable to resist a juicy detail for even a single moment, said, brightly, to the entire table, "Oh, isn't that the girl Sterling used to date? I heard she inherited some enormous fortune from an aunt, millions, apparently. Isn't that wild? Small world." I was not present for it. But I have, thanks to Dahlia's aforementioned network, a remarkably detailed second-hand account of exactly what Sterling Vance's face did in that moment, which I have replayed in my mind, gleefully, more times than I am willing to admit in writing. Sterling texted me 11 days after his mother's birthday dinner, at 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday, a time I have to assume was carefully chosen to seem casual, unplanned, spontaneous, despite what was clearly a message drafted and redrafted several times over. Hey. Been thinking about you. Hope you're doing well. We should catch up sometime, it's been a while. I stared at this text for a full minute before forwarding it directly to Dahlia with no additional commentary needed, because none was necessary. She responded within seconds with a single word, "No," followed immediately by a voice memo that was just her screaming into her pillow for 11 straight seconds, a callback, she explained later, to some spider story a friend told me once, felt thematically appropriate. I did not respond to Sterling that night. I let it sit, deliberately, for 3 full days, savoring the specific power of a message left unread by someone who very clearly, based on the follow-up texts that trickled in over those 3 days, "No worries if you're busy, then hope everything's okay." Then, finally, on day 3, the truly unhinged "Did I do something wrong?" was accustomed to being the one who set the pace in every relationship he'd ever been in. On day 4, I responded with exactly 6 words, I'm doing great. All is well. Nothing more. No opening. No invitation. Just a door, closed politely but firmly, in the specific way that leaves absolutely nothing for someone to push against. He called me that same evening. I let it ring out, twice, before finally, mostly out of curiosity, picking up on the third attempt. Cleo. His voice had that particular brightness I remembered so well, the performative warmth of a man who believes, fundamentally, that charm alone can rewrite recent history. It's so good to hear your voice. Look, I know things ended kind of abruptly between us, and I've been thinking a lot about it, and I miss you. Genuinely. I think I made a mistake. A mistake, I repeated, settling back onto my couch with the specific, comfortable satisfaction of a woman about to watch a very entertaining show unfold entirely for her own benefit. A huge mistake, he said. I was going through some stuff, some confusion. I think I got caught up in wanting something flashy, something that looked good, on paper, and I lost sight of what actually mattered, which was you. Your kindness. Your groundedness. My ordinariness, I offered. There was a pause, a small, telling hitch in his voice. I never should have said that. That was cruel. I didn't mean it. You said it 4 times, Sterling. In one sitting. Over risotto you ordered for both of us without asking if I wanted it. I know, and I'm sorry. Can we get dinner? Talk things through? I really think there's something worth saving here. I looked across my living room, at the small stack of paperwork on my coffee table from a meeting with a financial advisor earlier that week, at the framed photo on my bookshelf of me and Dahlia standing outside the bookstore on the day I officially became its owner, both of us grinning like idiots, and felt, with total clarity, the specific, immense satisfaction of a woman who no longer needed to explain herself to anyone. Sterling, I said, gently, almost kindly, how's Simone? And Marrakesh? Did she end up curating that exhibit she was so excited about? Another pause, longer this time. That didn't really work out. We weren't compatible, long term. She was a lot, honestly. Very high maintenance. Not like you. Not ordinary enough for you? Cleo, come on. I have to go, Sterling, I said, still gentle, still calm, savoring every single syllable of it. But it was really good catching up. I hung up before he could respond, and sat there in the sudden quiet of my apartment, phone still warm in my hand, feeling something settle in my chest that I can only describe as pure, uncomplicated peace, the specific peace of a door closing exactly on your own terms, in your own time, for your own reasons, with absolutely nobody's approval required. Dahlia, ever thorough, ever committed to what she now referred to unironically as the full arc of this story, insisted on gathering intelligence before I made any further decisions, which is how I found myself, 2 weeks later, sitting across from her at our favorite coffee shop while she relayed, with the theatrical relish of a woman delivering the finale of a soap opera, everything she'd managed to learn through the aforementioned extensive social network. Okay, she said, sliding into the booth with the energy of someone about to present a court case. So. Simone Delacroix Whitfield. Real person, real curator, but here's the thing, apparently she dumped him almost immediately after finding out he'd broken off an engagement to date her, because, and I'm quoting my source here, she thought it was, quote, a massive red flag that he'd, quote, traded up mid-relationship like I was a car upgrade. She wanted absolutely nothing to do with him after that. Called him, and I love this, emotionally unserious. Poetic, I said, sipping my coffee with tremendous satisfaction. It gets better. After Simone, he apparently went on a real bender of dates, trying to find someone with, his words, according to multiple sources, edge and ambition, and it went badly. Really badly. There was a woman named Portia who reportedly left mid-date after he corrected her wine order in front of the sommelier. There was someone else, a photographer, who apparently posted about him anonymously online, some story about a man who spent an entire first date describing his own 5-year plan uninterrupted for 45 minutes. That tracks. And then, Dahlia said, leaning forward now, voice dropping to a delighted, conspiratorial whisper, the real gem. Apparently he tried to get back together with an ex from before you. Someone named Marguerite, who he dated for like 8 months a few years back. And apparently, Cleo, I need you to brace yourself for this, apparently he used the exact same speech on her the first time around. Word for word, near enough. You're wonderful, but you're ordinary. Same phrase. Same restaurant, even, according to Marguerite, who apparently told a friend of a friend the whole thing verbatim, still bitter about it years later. I put my coffee down slowly, letting this land in full. He has a script. He has a script, Dahlia confirmed. A whole recycled, rehearsed script, that he apparently deploys anytime he gets bored or spooked or convinced someone shinier is around the corner. You are not special, Cleo. I mean, you are, obviously, you're the most special, but this ordinary speech, it's not even original to you. It's a bit. He's got a bit. I sat with this information for a long moment, feeling something shift and settle in my chest, some final, small piece of residual sting I hadn't even fully realized I was still carrying, dissolving completely, replaced by something lighter, funnier, more purely amused than hurt. I want to meet Marguerite, I said finally. Dahlia grinned, already reaching for her phone. I thought you might say that. Marguerite Fontaine, as it turned out, was delighted to meet me, and within a week, the three of us, me, Dahlia, and Marguerite, plus, eventually, a fourth woman named Portia, the wine correction victim, who Dahlia tracked down through a truly impressive chain of mutual acquaintances, had formed what Marguerite, only half joking, dubbed the Ordinary Girls Club, a loose, gleeful coalition of women who had all, at various points, been informed by Sterling Vance that they were wonderful, but ordinary, in the best way. We met at a wine bar downtown, the four of us, and the stories poured out over the course of an evening with the specific, cathartic hilarity of women comparing notes on a shared, absurd experience none of them had realized wasn't unique to them. He proposed a whole theory to me once, Portia said, gesturing with her glass, about how most people were background characters in their own lives, and how he was looking for someone who understood they weren't the main character. I genuinely thought, at the time, that this was deep. I was 26. I know better now. He told me my apartment was sweet, but a little small for someone with real ambition, Marguerite added. I owned it outright. He was renting. He does this thing, I said, where he starts every criticism with no offense, as though that's a magic word that makes the offensive thing not offensive. The no offense thing, Marguerite and Portia said, nearly in unison, with the specific horror of women recognizing a shared trauma, before dissolving into the kind of laughter that draws looks from other tables, the good kind, the kind that comes from finally, fully being understood. He used to rate restaurants out loud, Marguerite offered, once she'd recovered. Not to the waiter. To me. Mid-meal. This is a solid 7, the risotto's under-seasoned, I'd have sent it back but I don't want to make a scene. Every single dinner. I ate approximately 400 meals as a captive audience to a man doing unpaid, unsolicited restaurant criticism. He told me once, Portia added, completely unprompted, over appetizers, that he thought most women peaked socially in their 20s and that he admired me for fighting against the trend. I was 27. I didn't understand until much later that this was, somehow, supposed to be a compliment. Wait, there's a whole taxonomy, I said, reaching for my phone. We should actually write this down. For posterity. For science. And so, somewhere around the second bottle, the four of us began compiling what would eventually become the full Sterling Vance Field Guide in earnest, not just the no offense opener, but the follow-up tells, the way he'd describe any woman he found intimidating as a lot, the way he'd praise a restaurant loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, the way he always, without fail, ordered for the table to save time, the way every single one of his stories somehow looped back, within 4 sentences, to a specific achievement of his own from college that none of us, notably, had ever once asked to hear about. There's a pattern, Dahlia said, scrolling back through the growing list on my phone with the focused intensity of a woman building a case file. He doesn't actually want a partner. He wants a mirror that occasionally claps. A mirror that occasionally claps, Marguerite repeated, delighted. I want that on a t-shirt. I want that on my tombstone, Portia said, raising her glass. To mirrors that occasionally clap, and to the four of us, who are done clapping. We toasted to that, all 4 glasses meeting in the middle of the table with a satisfying clink, and I remember thinking, in that exact moment, glowing slightly from wine and vindication and the sheer, unexpected gift of finding 3 women who understood a very specific, very stupid kind of heartbreak without needing a single thing explained twice, that this table, this laughter, this shared, ridiculous solidarity, was worth infinitely more than anything $12 million could ever buy on its own. By the end of that night, slightly too many glasses of wine deep, the 4 of us had developed what Dahlia called, with tremendous ceremony, the Sterling Vance Field Guide, a loose collection of warning signs, in-jokes, and shared vocabulary that, I would later learn, several of us actually did pass along, informally, to other women in our extended social circles over the following months, a kind of grassroots public service announcement network, built entirely out of spite and wine and the specific solidarity of women who'd all separately, individually, been told they weren't enough by the exact same man using the exact same rehearsed monologue. You know what the funniest part is, Marguerite said, near the end of the night, swirling the last of her wine. He's going to keep doing this. To someone else. Right now, probably. Some poor woman is out there right now, hearing about her spark deficiency over a risotto she didn't order. Not anymore, Dahlia said, with the grim satisfaction of a woman who has just realized the true scope of her own accidental crusade. Because now there's a group chat. There was, in fact, now a group chat, and it had, over the following months, grown to include 6 women total, all connected, eventually, distantly, through Sterling Vance's long, unbroken chain of identical breakup speeches, delivered with what I can only assume he genuinely believed was fresh, spontaneous emotional honesty each and every time. I want to be honest and tell you that in the months following the breakup, I did, eventually, try dating again, mostly at Dahlia's insistence. You don't have to marry anyone, Cleo, just remember what it feels like to sit across from a man who isn't secretly grading your personality, and that my very first attempt at this was, unfortunately, an almost perfect mirror of everything I'd just escaped, which I choose to view now, in retrospect, as the universe delivering one final, necessary lesson before letting me move on properly. His name was Grant. Grant worked in what he described, 3 separate times over the course of a single appetizer, as disruptive fintech, and spent the first 20 minutes of our date explaining, unprompted, the exact mechanics of his own investment portfolio, a topic I had not raised, did not want raised, and had, at that point in my life, considerably more direct and personal expertise in than he apparently assumed. "You seem surprised," he said, at one point, after I asked a mildly technical follow-up question about diversification that he clearly hadn't expected me to be capable of forming. "Do you follow markets?" "A little," I said, which was, at that stage, a fairly significant understatement, given that I had, by then, 3 separate meetings a month with a financial advisor and had recently funded a full building renovation without blinking. "That's cute," Grant said, and I felt, with the specific, weary recognition of a woman who has heard this exact tone before, We did not, in fact, retire the dating apps, though I did delete Grant's number before I'd even reached my car, filing the whole encounter away as useful confirmation of something I'd already begun to suspect, that the specific flavor of condescension Sterling had built an entire personality around wasn't nearly as rare or as personal as I'd once assumed, and that the actual work ahead of me wasn't finding a man who wouldn't do this. Plenty existed, I'd eventually learn, patient and unbothered, and genuinely curious about the people across from them, but simply refusing, from that point forward, to sit quietly through it ever again, from anyone, for any reason, no matter how good the risotto. The universe, having apparently decided it wasn't finished with this particular story, arranged for Sterling and me to end up at the same charity gala roughly 4 months after our breakup, an event I was attending as a newly minted, moderately terrifying donor to the city's literacy foundation, and one he was attending, I would later learn, as the plus one of yet another woman he was in the early, honeymoon phase of dazzling. I saw him before he saw me, across the ballroom, resplendent in a tuxedo that had clearly been rented specifically for maximum impact, gesturing animatedly at a woman who wore the specific, glazed expression of someone being told, at great length, about someone's 5-year plan. He spotted me near the dessert table, and I watched, with genuine scientific interest, as his face moved through an entire, rapid sequence of emotions, recognition, surprise, a flicker of something that might have been panic, and finally, landing, with visible effort, on a kind of forced, overcompensating charm. "Cleo." He crossed the room with the specific energy of a man determined to control a narrative he could feel slipping away from him. "Wow. You look incredible. I didn't know you'd be here." "I'm a donor," I said, simply, watching this information land on his face with almost violent force. "The foundation's doing wonderful work. I'm actually funding a full renovation of the children's wing at the downtown branch." He stopped, recalibrating in real time. Wow. That's incredibly generous." "It's really nothing," I said, which was, delightfully, both a lie and the truth simultaneously, depending entirely on your relationship to the number 12 million. His date drifted over at this point, extending a hand with the polite confusion of someone sensing an undercurrent she wasn't yet privy to, and Sterling, flustered in a way I had genuinely never once witnessed in 14 months of dating him, fumbled through an introduction that somehow managed to describe me, in the same breath, as both an old friend and, bafflingly, someone I used to know from the bookstore, a description so aggressively diminishing, so transparently designed to minimize whatever he was clearly, visibly panicking about, that I nearly laughed out loud right there among the dessert table's elaborate chocolate fountain display. "It was lovely catching up," I said, before he could fumble through any further introductions, and turned to walk away, only to be stopped, gently, by his hand on my arm, a gesture I allowed to last exactly as long as it took me to raise one eyebrow at which point he withdrew it with the speed of a man who'd touched something hotter than expected. His date, to her credit, had by this point clearly clocked the temperature of the exchange, and returned from her brief detour to the passing server with a full glass of champagne and an expression of polite, wary curiosity, glancing between Sterling and me with the specific look of a woman doing rapid, silent math. "Sorry," she said, extending a hand toward me with considerably more warmth than Sterling had managed in his entire fumbled introduction. "I don't think I caught your name properly." Sterling said something about a bookstore? "Cleo Bramwell," I said, shaking her hand. "I own the bookstore, actually. And I'm one of tonight's donors, funding the renovation of the downtown branch's children's wing." Her eyebrows rose, just slightly, in a way that told me she was recalculating something in real time, the same recalculation I'd watched cross so many faces over the preceding months. "Wait, the Ordinary Girls Fund? I read about that. That's incredible work. My cousin actually applied for one of the grants last cycle." "Small world," I said, delighted, watching Sterling's face do something complicated and pained beside us, caught now, awkwardly, between two women having a perfectly pleasant conversation that he had absolutely no useful role in. "We should talk sometime," his date said, entirely sincere, entirely unaware, or, I suspected, based on the faint, knowing curve of her mouth, entirely and gleefully aware of exactly how uncomfortable this pleasant little exchange was making the man standing between us. "I'd love to hear more about the fund." "I'd like that," I said, and meant it, filing away, with real amusement, the distinct possibility that Sterling's newest romantic prospect might end up, in some delightfully roundabout way, becoming an ally rather than an obstacle, a pattern I was beginning to suspect might simply be inevitable any time a woman spent more than 20 consecutive minutes actually listening to him. "Can we talk?" he said, quietly, his date now several steps away, distracted by a passing server. "Really talk. I've been thinking about us a lot, Cleo. I think I made the biggest mistake of my life." "Sterling," I said, and here, finally, gently, without any real anger left in it at all, just the clean, settled clarity of a woman who has fully, completely moved on, "you didn't make a mistake losing me. You made a mistake thinking I was ever the ordinary one in this relationship." I walked away before he could respond, found Dahlia by the bar already mid-laugh at something on her phone, and by the time I reached her, she turned the screen toward me, revealing a text from Portia, apparently also in attendance, spotted across the ballroom, watching the whole exchange unfold from a safe distance, that simply read, "Did he just get rejected at a charity gala in front of his new girlfriend? I am ascending. I am becoming light." 3 weeks after the gala, I sat in the office of my financial advisor, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Naomi Reyes who had, over the preceding months, guided me through the strange, occasionally overwhelming process of learning to think like someone with $12 million rather than someone perpetually calculating whether a latte fit into her weekly budget. "I want to do something specific with a portion of this," I told her, sliding a folder across her desk. "I want to fund scholarships. Small business grants, specifically for women starting independent bookstores, or similar small creative businesses. Women who've been told, at some point, by someone in their life, that their ambitions were too small, too safe, too ordinary." Naomi looked up from the folder, a small, knowing smile crossing her face. "This is oddly specific phrasing, Cleo." "It's inspired by someone," I said. "A muse, of sorts." "A good muse or a bad one?" "The best kind," I said. "The kind who has absolutely no idea he's a muse at all." We named it, eventually, the Ordinary Girls Fund, a title that made Dahlia, upon hearing it for the first time, laugh so hard she had to sit down on my kitchen floor for the second time in this entire saga. The first grant recipient announced 8 months later, a 24-year-old aspiring shop owner named Josephine Calloway, who wanted to open a small independent bookstore in her hometown and had been told, by an ex-boyfriend, almost verbatim, that her dreams were sweet, but a little small. I did not tell Sterling about the fund. I didn't need to. Word travels, in small cities, through friend groups, through mothers who can't keep a secret for the length of a mailbox walk, and roughly 2 months after its announcement, Dahlia forwarded me a screenshot from a mutual acquaintance's social media, a comment left under a local news article about the fund's first grant, posted by an account that was, unmistakably, unbelievably, Sterling Vance's own personal profile. "This is amazing, so proud of the work being done here, always knew Cleo had it in her." Dahlia's accompanying message consisted entirely of the words, the audacity followed by 17 consecutive crying laughing emojis, a level of punctuation I felt was, under the circumstances, entirely warranted. The bookstore, my bookstore, fully, entirely, on paper and in every other way that matters, celebrated its 1-year anniversary under my full ownership with a party that took over the entire block, string lights strung between buildings, a local band playing on a small stage we'd built specifically for the occasion, and every single person I actually cared about crammed into a space too small to hold the amount of joy in it. Dahlia gave a toast that started with the words, "To ordinary women everywhere," which got a knowing, delighted laugh from at least 6 people in the crowd who'd, by that point, become regular fixtures at what was now a standing monthly dinner for the Ordinary Girls Club, membership having grown, organically, uncomfortably, to a total of 9 women, all connected by the same rehearsed monologue, all of whom had, in their own ways, gone on to do considerably better than a man who peaked professionally and romantically at describing his own 5-year plan uninterrupted at dinner. Marguerite, it turned out, had started dating someone wonderful, a quiet, funny architect who apparently once described her as the most interesting person in any room she walks into, a phrase Marguerite reported back to the group chat with the specific, satisfied triumph of a woman who had finally, fully closed a chapter she hadn't realized was still open. Portia had, in a twist nobody saw coming, started her own wine consulting business, specifically, gleefully, for restaurants looking to train their staff on customer service, because, she told me at the party, glass in hand, if there's one thing my ex-almost relationship with Sterling Vance taught me, it's how not to correct someone's order in front of a sommelier. And Sterling, as far as I've been able to gather through the same reliable network that has kept me informed of his every misstep for the better part of 2 years now, is, last I heard, still single, still dating in the same small circles, his reputation apparently having outpaced him, thanks in no small part, I'll fully admit, to 9 women who eventually found each other and decided, collectively, that discretion was no longer required. I saw him once more, briefly, months after the gala, from across a street, waiting to cross at a light, still in the same overpriced blazers, still, I'd bet everything, in possession of some version of the same rehearsed speech, ready to be redeployed on whoever crossed his path next, mistaking her, inevitably, tragically, for ordinary. I didn't cross the street to say hello. I didn't need to. I simply stood there, for one small, satisfied moment, watching a man who had once told me, with total confidence, that I lacked spark, that I lacked ambition, that I was simply, fundamentally, too safe to hold his interest, watching him wait at a crosswalk in a life exactly as small as the one he'd always secretly feared having, while mine, $12 million and one very good bookstore and 9 gloriously unordinary women richer, had grown into something he never once, in 14 months, had the imagination to see coming. The light changed. He crossed. I turned and walked the other way, toward my own life, unbothered, unordinary, entirely, gloriously my own. I'd be lying if I said the story ends cleanly there, at a crosswalk, tidy and symbolic, because real life rarely wraps itself up quite that neatly, and the truth is the Ordinary Girls group chat is still active, to this day, buzzing at strange hours with updates that have, mercifully, less and less to do with Sterling Vance himself and more to do with the actual, expanding lives of the women who found each other because of him. Marguerite got engaged last spring, to the quiet architect, in a proposal she described to the group chat, breathlessly, at 1 a.m, as the opposite of a risotto speech. He just cried and said my name 4 times and that was somehow the whole thing and it was perfect. Portia's wine consulting business now has 3 full-time employees and a wait list. Josephine Calloway, the very first Ordinary Girls Fund recipient, sent me a photograph last month of her bookstore's first anniversary, a cake in the shape of a stack of books sitting proudly in the window, and a note that simply read, "Thank you for believing my dream wasn't too small. I hope you know it's already bigger than I ever imagined." And Dahlia, who started this whole saga with a bottle of Prosecco on my kitchen floor, who bought binoculars for an entirely different friend's entirely different crisis and somehow ended up, months later, running informal reconnaissance on my behalf instead. Dahlia still, to this day, refers to the whole ordeal as the greatest story I've ever gotten to live through secondhand, and has, on more than one occasion, threatened to write the whole thing up herself, properly, with a title. Maybe I'll call it The Ordinary Girl's Revenge. It practically writes itself. Cleo, you have to let me. I haven't let her, not yet, mostly because I've been busy, with the bookstore, with the fund, with a life that no longer requires anyone's permission to feel big enough. But every so often, late at night, closing out the shop, flipping the sign from open to closed, I catch myself thinking about that risotto, undercooked, ordered without asking, and about the specific, ridiculous gift it turned out to be, a man so certain I was small that he never once thought to look closer, never once imagined that the woman across the table, quietly nodding along to his monologue about spark and edge and ambition, was already, silently, calmly, in the process of becoming something entirely beyond the shape he'd decided to see. Ordinary, in the best way. I've decided, finally, 2 years and $12 million later, that I'll take it. If you enjoyed this one, hit subscribe. I post stories like this every week, and trust me, this isn't even the wildest one I've got. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever found out about a secret windfall, a secret ex, or a secret anything right after a breakup? I want to hear it. I might read the best ones in my next video. And if you want more from the Ordinary Girls Club, let me know in the comments. I've got Marguerite's story, Portia's story, and a few more I haven't told yet. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.